I want to personally say thank you again for being here. It's been a real pleasure spending the day with you. I had a chance to speak with some of you that I see year and year again, and it's always really a happy moment to see you again. I want to take some moments just to talk about Liferay and the motivation for our company, which many of you know, but for those of you who are new to our community, I want to let you know. I ended this morning's talk by saying that technology is not the main thing. And just to clarify, of course, I think we all realize that technology matters very much. It enables us to do things that we were never able to do before. And to illustrate this point, I wanted to give you an example from the world of photography. I came across the work of Vincent Liferay earlier this year, and was really fascinated to see what he's been able to accomplish with the latest digital technology. And he shares about a moment that he experienced when he realized that digital camera technology had surpassed the physical world, meaning his human eyes. He was looking into a dark spot out in the distance, and all he saw was black. But when he raised his camera to that same spot, it was able to discern that there was actually a green bush with red berries on it, something that he couldn't actually see with his own naked eyes. And so this was the moment he realized that digital camera technology is totally the future. And he went on to create a number of really stunning photographs of major cities around the world. You can see London, New York, Paris, and Los Angeles. And so certainly technology matters. I think we all realize that here as technologists. And yet sometimes our impulse to go after the latest and greatest technology blinds us to what's truly important. Sometimes we feel like we can do anything if we just have technology. And so I wanted to give one example where technology actually was not the main thing that enabled a company to implement their strategy. And it comes from a fairly unlikely place, which is 7-Eleven in Japan. Despite Japan being a very high-tech place in terms of gadgets, they actually tend to follow after North America and Europe when it comes to IT. And for a company like 7-Eleven, it was also really surprising because they are retail and they're very much in front of the consumer. Well, so I learned this story about 7-Eleven and found it really interesting. If you look at their locations throughout the country of Japan, they almost have complete coverage of all of the urban areas. And in fact, when you compare in the greater Tokyo area, the number of post offices to 7-Elevens, you can actually see that 7-Eleven is even covering the country even better than the government. So how did they use this information? Well, at some point they decided that they wanted to understand their consumers much better. They wanted to know what they were buying, what they weren't buying, the time of day that they were doing these things, and then use that information to make better decisions about the supply chain, what to actually offer, and get more just-in-time inventory and so forth. So how did they do that? You could call this one of their first big data projects that they underwent, and they had a very, very secret weapon that was decidedly low-tech, and it was actually their retail clerks. What they did was they instructed every store to collect this information manually. So every time a customer would come to the counter, the clerk would actually look at them, kind of guess their age. They would, say that whether they were male or female, and then they would have a record of everything they bought and the time that they bought it. And so, over time, they were actually able to collect 7 billion different pieces of information about point of sales, and then use that to basically predict what customers wanted. If you've ever been to Japan, you know that one of the biggest crazy things that they have is they have hundreds and hundreds of drinks, right? Soft drinks, green tea, bubbly water, all kinds of fruit juices, and all these things. In fact, I think at any given time, there's probably about 4,000 to 5,000 drinks on the market, but 7-Eleven is able to use this information to only carry the 70 to 80 most popular drinks and sell those to the public. Well, so this is all really cool. It's very interesting. And you may be wondering when they did this. Well, I actually found out that this case study was from this book called The Harvard Design School Guide to Shopping. And it was from 2002, 13 years ago. So a lot of us as technologists or technical people, we like to lead first with technology, but we don't always realize that sometimes we have the tools we need right at our fingertips. And I think the 7-Eleven case study shows that what's more important than technology is the way that technology relates to people, or what I call the interface. And in their case, they actually had a very, very good interface already in place, which was their store network. And instead of saying, oh my goodness, I need the latest Internet of Things and I need Bluetooth sensors everywhere, they simply said, let's take our staff and create this interface for collecting data, which is actually just looking at people and finding out what they're buying, right? So you may look at your own business process, and realize that many of the tools that you need are already available. As technologists, another thing that we often do when it comes to the interface, one thing that we get wrong is to overcomplicate. This is a photo from a Volkswagen around the transition period from cassette tapes to CDs. And you could see that they had a very hard time choosing which interfaces to present. And so they kind of just decided to present all of them, right? There's like 12 different preset buttons there. There's a separate place for putting the cassette and separate place for the CD. There's actually a 6 CD changer. And let's not forget the radio. And yet, when you think about the context and what the user is trying to do at this time, this is going to be very, very distracting. And so some people might not even use music at all in the car. And this is an example of course, the latest technology, which is Apple CarPlay. But one thing that I think they're getting really right, which is very simple, is just decluttering and helping the user focus on what's really important. So the other thing about interfaces and technology is that sometimes we may, pine for and long for the latest and greatest things, but not all of us have the capacity to do what that requires. We may covet the photos of Vincent Liferay, but most of us don't have the budget or the will to actually hang out from the side of a helicopter with image stabilization technology and the most expensive cameras to take these shots. And so interface and technology ultimately, I believe, support human experience. Looking at this old picture of a Polaroid, I think it's obvious to all of us what you're supposed to do when you have one of these in your hands. And I think the genius of the Polaroid, of course, is the simplicity and the straightforwardness of the interface. Using color to delineate very clearly to the user what they're supposed to do. But also, ultimately, the kinds of human experiences that they enable. This is a short video. I tried to capture the full exposure of the photo, but I didn't get the beginning part. But I took this photo with our general manager in France, Frank, back in Paris in June. And it was this whole thing. His wife had the camera. We stood there, took the photo, and it immediately comes out, and you put it on the table, and you wait for it to expose. And it's quite a memorable thing. I've probably taken over 10,000 digital photos, but I don't remember them as clear as I do this one. And then it's this physical thing you can hold in your hand, you can pass it around, and then afterwards you can put it in your briefcase. And quite frankly, this is one of the few photographs I actually have displayed in my house precisely for that reason. And so when technology gets out of the way, when it becomes very simple, when you have the right interface in place, then you enable these very, very memorable and emotionally satisfying human experiences that I think ultimately we're all after. So as you think about how to use some of the lessons you've learned today and some of the technologies you use today, I hope that you will keep these lessons in mind and ultimately apply those. Now, I want to close just by relating this thought to the vision and the purpose of Liferay as a company. Very simply, the purpose of Liferay as a company, if you know our history, we started about 11 years ago, and we decided that we wanted to build a company that maximizes the potential of people to serve others. This is a rendition of our vision statement that we came up with this year in 2015, when we finally realized that we had gotten to a size that not everyone kind of understood the culture and the vision of Liferay. And so we wanted to formalize this. There was a lot of struggle, a lot of hand-wringing, especially on my part, of how do you choose just a few words to encapsulate what Liferay is about? And the reason why we like this is because the emphasis is not just on help people reach their full potential, because that can actually be a very selfish pursuit. But when you say that the reason for them to fulfill their potential is to serve others, then you put everything in proper perspective. Now, you probably already know that Liferay, we try to do a lot of things like making donations and volunteering and that sort of thing. This, for example, is one of our groups that went to South America to build a well for a village community. This is some of our employees in Spain helping to build a shelter for women who have been rescued out of trafficking. And that's all very good and fine, and we do, of course, embrace and encourage that. But I ultimately hope our vision and our company can go actually deeper than that, because we don't just want to help someone once or hand out a meal or something like that once, but we want to fundamentally alter people's outcomes and make it possible for them to be empowered to actually change their life for themselves. And to illustrate this point, I wanted to share with you about an architect that I quite admire and have a lot of respect for, whose name is Shigeru Ban. You may know of Mr. Ban's work. It's quite famous and well-renowned throughout the world. He created, for example, the Metz extension of the Centre Pompidou in Metz in 2010. He also created this very creative house in Tokyo called the Curtain House in 1995. But rather than just being this very kind of academic or esoteric architect only for people who are wealthy enough to afford him, he's done quite a bit of work to help people through the practice of architecture. You may also know that I have a heart for Northeast Japan, where the tsunami happened in 2013. And Mr. Ban has also been active in one of the towns that was affected here. Here you see a map of Japan and the town of Onagawa, and you can see just how devastating the tsunami must have been for them. That's the Pacific Ocean, and that wall of water just shoved directly into that harbor right there, which is where the town sits. And so the whole town was completely devastated, completely flattened, and everything, including hospitals, schools, businesses, and the train station was completely wiped out. And so Mr. Ban was able to go into the city of Onagawa and not just build them a temporary train station, not just put up sticks and corrugated steel, but he actually made something really beautiful in the place of the old station. This wasn't actually the first time that he's done this, so he's actually been in a number of disaster scenarios where he would create temporary housing. This is a church building in New Zealand that he created after the Christchurch earthquake called the Paper Church. And I guess what impressed me about Mr. Ban is that it was precisely his excellence in pursuing a career in architecture and his international stature that then allows him to have something to share with the world. And Liferay as a company, that's what we're after. We want our software to be the best, and we want our business to be successful ultimately because we want to use these things to make an impact in the world, whether it's in a nonprofit way, whether it's in a for-profit way. A lot of companies started out in open source in the early 2000s. We were among them. I think there was quite a trend at the time, but now a lot of them have shifted into SaaS and other business models. one of the reasons why we continue to be committed to open source is because we believe not only is it the best way to build software, but it's also the best way to maximize the value that that software brings to the world. So the fact that not all of you are paying customers of Liferay, but you're using Liferay software to create value for your communities and organizations is something that ultimately fulfills the vision and purpose of our company. So, as I stand before you here today, I want to also encourage you to seek and to find out what that is for you personally. What are the skills and talents that you've invested in, that you've developed as a professional that you can use to help the people around you, to help communities, and to empower them? Continuing on the example of Onagawa, this is the temporary shopping center that was built after the town was destroyed so that the small business owners could continue to carry on their businesses. This is a photo of the shop owners. And a marketing and advertising agency in a nearby city called Sendai offered to help these people with some fun and creative posters to promote their businesses. So you could see some of these here. They're quite flashy. They might be something you would see in Tokyo or London or Rome. But it was for this very, very small rural village called Onagawa. So they were able to take their creative talents as marketing and advertising people and help them to kind of revitalize the business, but also give them a sense of pride to make up for the fact that they were living and working out of these temporary locations. Here's just one example. On the left, it's a very, very kind of down-to-earth, humble curry shop owner, and the advertisement that they created for it was quite out of character. But this is the sort of thing that you can do when you think about how you can use your personal talents to give back to others. So I just want to close with this quote from Mr. Ban, who said that one of his main motivations for the work that he does is for people to be happy using his buildings. And in the same way, in the morning, I talked about not focusing on the technology, but focusing on the people's experience. We hope that you don't walk away from us today at this event thinking, oh, it's all about Liferay. But for us as a company, we're ultimately satisfied, and we feel that we've fulfilled our purpose and made our contribution to society when we've empowered all of you to take our technology, to create experiences, to help people, to improve their lives, and empower them as well. So please help us to do that by continuing to invest in our community. Help us understand how we can better use our technology and build the right things so that you can go on and do your jobs in contributing to the world around you as well. Thanks very much.